Take a network break. I'm Jonna Johnson.
I'm John Burke. Grab your virtual donut and walk around with us as we take a gander at a major Azure event, a bunch of switching news from Cisco, Arista, and others, some AI news from Palo Alto, and more.
But first, today's episode sponsor is Meter. Meter delivers full-stack networking infrastructure from wired to wireless to cellular in a single integrated solution that scales from branch offices, warehouses, and large campuses to data centers. Go to meter.com/networkbreak to book a demo now. That's meter.com/networkbreak to book a demo. First up, John, we have some follow-up. There's a reference here that in Network Break 549, there was a talk of small modular nuclear reactors and fusion reactors. There is some good information about all sorts of nuclear energy topics from Illinois Energy Prof on YouTube, which is literally youtube.com/@Illinois Energy Prof 6878. Again, that's at Illinois Energy Prof 6878. He's got a video specifically regarding SMRs and older videos regarding nuclear fusion. So maybe we can spend some time on a future episode talking about that. We also do talk about that on things like heavy strategy. He also has a good video about how long it can take a nuclear power plant to become profitable, which, if you didn't know, is over 20 years. But then they're significantly more profitable versus coal or natural gas, which may be of interest to financial planning. It is quite an educational video. And so, yeah, please go have a look at it.
I wonder if the same kind of profitability issues will affect these smaller modular plants. I think one of the things they're aimed at is bringing profitability faster.
I would think so, but I don't think they ever factor into the profitability disposal of the waste. And I could be wrong. I haven't watched the videos, so don't write in and tell me I'm wrong. I will watch the videos, I promise.
It would not be at all surprising.
Yeah. Okay, John, over to you for this week's Red Alert.
Red Alert, sound the klaxon. We have a Firefox sandbox jailbreak story this time. There were 926 CVEs published in the last 7 days and 2,114 updated. Of these, 537 were critical, scoring 9 or higher on their CVSS, and 81 scored a 10 out of 10. So it's a big week for major threats. This week's Red Alert, though, scored only 9.8 out of 10. It is CVE 2025-12380, a sandbox escape that affects Firefox. Starting with version 142, so I think that was mid-year last year, and up through the last but one version, it was possible for a compromised child process to escape the sandbox it was running in, thanks to a use after freed flaw in the web GPU function. That is, it was possible for a compromised web page to nudge a browser process to use memory after it had been freed by the process, and to seed that memory with malware that would execute with higher privileges, putting data and credentials at risk. Since a lot of folks adopt Firefox specifically to improve their browser security, this one is worth fixing as soon as possible. And of course, the fix is, say it with me, folks, upgrade to the current version, which is 144.0.2.
Either that or fly the patch. But yeah, that is an interesting one. I don't think I'd encountered the use after free flaw before. So that is a little tricky and clever. So
yeah, it's like your Stack Overflow, you're reading past the end of the buffer thing. It's one of those top 10 web page or application issues that just shows up perennially because people continue to make the mistake generation after generation.
Yes, can't fix human nature. As one of my CISO friends always used to put it, the problem is with CBUs, carbon-based units, and that includes programmers and as well as users. Okay, well, moving on to things that are perennial. Yes, we've got another Microsoft issue. What a surprise. If you were paying attention last week between 15:45 UTC on the 29th of October and 05 UTC on October 30th, that's about an 8-hour, 20-minute stretch, customers and all the Microsoft services leveraging the Azure Front Door AFD service experienced a major disruption that happened globally. The Microsoft services that were affected, and by affected we mean either unreachable or erratic, were Azure Portal, Azure Communication Services, Databricks, Healthcare APIs, Maps, SQL Database, Virtual Desktop, Copilot for Security, Microsoft 365, as well as parts of Azure Active Directory, Microsoft Entra, Microsoft Defender, and Microsoft Sentinel. Well, that's kind of a full spectrum outage. AFD is a CDN Microsoft uses as its layer 7 application delivery edge. Microsoft attributed the outage to, wait a minute, here's another perennial, inadvertent configuration change in AFD that resulted in inconsistent or incorrect routing and DNS behavior. Yes, another DNS issue that propagated rapidly across AFD's nodes. DNS and other requests began to time out, TLS handshakes failed or were redirected to unreachable origins, and as bad nodes were pulled out of service by automation, problems were compounded in load balancing failures, overloading even still healthy nodes. Recovery was slow as engineers had to push the clean configs across the large number of affected nodes at a pace that allowed continuous traffic rebalancing in order to avoid creating new overloads on functioning nodes. Microsoft traced that inadvertent configuration change to a faulty tenant configuration deployment process. A software defect in the process used to validate and block erroneous deployments allowed a faulty tenant configuration to bypass security validations. The ability of AFD customers to modify their configurations remained frozen even after the primary problems were fixed, while additional validation and roadblock controls were implemented to try to prevent similar issues in the futures. And lots of great info in show notes. John, any thoughts, comments? Y'all know what I think.
Well, I mean, after the AWS outage last week, it's, of course, illustrating the fact that the cloud providers are fully capable of shooting themselves in the foot, either urgently, as with the AWS flaw last week, or a little more roundaboutly, as with this Azure flaw, because the flaw wasn't with a configuration that Azure was pushing out at the moment. The problem ultimately started with a configuration that somebody in a tenant space was pushing out that screwed up Azure's global services because of problems in how they process those tenant configurations. So basically, they allowed a tenant to step on their global services footprint. And that's a slow burn kind of a shoot yourself in the foot, if that's not too mixed a metaphor.
Yeah, that you burn yourself in the foot. I would also direct everyone's attention to the Heavy Strategies podcast number 111. A nice number, makes me happy. It's called When Someone Makes Your Cloud Service Go Poof. And it talks about strategies that enterprises can take because the sort of reason we actually did that podcast was when Microsoft intentionally shut off cloud services to a company. But it highlights the fact that since most companies are making single provider bets for core services, everybody is exposed to this. And so whether you're an AWS aficionado or whether you're on Microsoft, basically when your cloud service goes poof, you are dead in the water. So what should you do about that and how should you plan for that before it happens again? And again is the operative word. It's not like this is not going to keep happening.
Definitely going to happen again.
Yeah, and we can't pick which vendor it's going to be. You roll the dice, but definitely take steps. Okay, and again, that's Heavy Strategy number 111. Moving right along, Palo Alto is releasing new multiple AI security offerings. On the one hand, Palo Alto is protecting AI use in the enterprise, releasing Prisma AIRS 2.0, which it bills as comprehensive end-to-end AI security. On the other, it's also releasing new ways to use AI to boost its other products. Palo Alto says AIRS now offers inspections of AI agents and models during the development phase, which is incredibly important, as well as protection for real-time inference phase production against agent defenses, securing all interactions between AI models, agents, data, and users. They say it will also discover and inventory all AI agents in use, both sanctioned and shadow. I don't really have to explain, at least I hope I don't have to explain how incredibly important this capability is, because one of the huge issues with AI agents is that they can literally start running amok and doing things that you never intended them to do. And the first step in understanding that and protecting against that is understanding what you have and what it's doing. Development phase protections that Palo Alto is enhancing include architectural analysis of models, looking for threats, architectural backdoors, data poisoning, and malicious code within the model layers. It also generates a kind of, not specifically, but a kind of software bill of materials, which includes information on model architecture, training datasets, open source licenses, and all software dependencies. Production phase, which is the last one, includes inline defenses against prompt injections, tool misuse, and general malicious agent behavior. Palo Alto also says it applies autonomous AI-powered and AI-focused red teaming against the tools to provide continuous, context-aware, and AI-specific testing and validation of the defenses. And best of all, AIRS 2.0 is now available. On that aforementioned other hand, it has also separately released Cortex Agentics with an X, an AI agent tool belt upgrade to its XOR platform. It includes task-focused agents threats for threat intelligence, endpoint investigation, email investigation, network threat response, IT operations, and for cloud posture management, threat detection and response. The whole goal here is to allow enterprises to roll their own AI agents in a no-code toolbench, orchestrate workflows, and apply guardrails to limit the scope of action of autonomous tools. John, thoughts?
I am especially thrilled by two things in here. On the one hand, those development phase protections that are specifically looking for malicious code hidden within model layers, because I think people too often swallow the model whole as though there's no possibility of it being engineered to do bad things when given just the right inputs. It's like
snark, 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 as though there were no possibility. Snark, 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 right. As we know from looking at Harmbench, there's infinite possibility.
Exactly so. And that network stack bugs that would only respond to a specific sequence of packets coming in and were otherwise, inert and essentially undetectable without close code analysis, it's possible to engineer a model to respond to a specific weird prompt in ways that are not otherwise visible because they'll never otherwise emerge. So that's one thing. I love that. And I love the fact that it is providing a mechanism. The other tool, the Agentics tool, is providing a mechanism for slapping guardrails around agents acting on your behalf in your environment. That it's giving you the ability to say it can go this far or this fast, but anything more than that requires a human intervention without sticking that directly into each workflow.
Yeah, and I think my takeaway on this is what I really like to see is a vendor that actually understands cybersecurity, deeply understands cybersecurity, applying all of the best practices to the world of AI. To me, this is a really big deal because if you're going to buy AI security, don't buy it from an AI startup. Don't buy it from a vendor that just discovered security last week. Get it from one of the many vendors that actually have been thinking about this for 20 years or more and have become very acutely aware of the types of problems that can arise, regardless of whether you're talking about AI or just random code. One of the things that should become apparent from all of our red alerts is that it's the same set of problems over and over and over and over again. And that is the nature of cybersecurity. People keep making the same problems. And they just, whenever there's a new tool or new technology, they just pick that up and port all the mistakes and issues to the new tool and technology. So this is an area where experience matters, and it's good to see. Yep.
Like applying the learnings from web application firewalls that are in line to prevent SQL injection attacks because people keep making it possible to execute SQL injection attacks against their stuff. So inline filtering to prevent it translates directly to inline filtering of prompts, looking for
prompt injections,
suspicious prompts. Yep,
exactly. And thank you for spelling that out with a concrete example, because I tend to be sometimes too up in the clouds. Speaking for clouds and cloud infrastructure, John, I think we've got a new announcement from Arista.
Yep, Arista's got some spanky new 800 gig switches out and something called HyperPort for helping folks building AI data centers engineer a scale across environment. So its new switch and router platforms in the R4 family target scale out and scale across data center and AI infrastructure use cases. The products range from 10 gig Ethernet to 800 gig Ethernet on port level, and with modular options that include a monster 7800 R4 modular chassis that offers up to 576 ports of 800 gig Ethernet. All the options, of course, run Arista's EOS operating system, and of particular note is that HyperPort option. Arista has announced it. It's not shipping yet, which is specifically for interconnecting AI workloads across physically distant data centers, the scale across strategy. With the HyperPort, an R4 model leveraging Broadcom's Jericho 3 Plus ASIC and recent updates to EOS can serve, the whole switch can serve as a single 3.2 terabit per second interface. Arista claims that when it's out, it will offer a 44% faster AI job completion rate than just load balancing the AI traffic across 4 separate 800 gig Ethernet ports. It's expecting to have the HyperPort out in Q1 of 2026, which is not that far away anymore.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Bigger, badder, faster, better. Not sure what else to say, but it's certainly that single 3.2 terabit per second interface is actually the most, to me, that's the most interesting, because that is actually one of the harder things to do engineering wise. You can't just necessarily say, let's sum up all these lower speeds and make one honking big faster speed, and they did it. So
it really highlights the overhead involved in load balancing across multiple ports, or separately bonding them at a different layer of the infrastructure. I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, if you talk about things that never change in some sense in networking, there's basically two things that we often try to do. We try to make up for slow data rates, and we try to make up for poor latency, and we have all sorts of fancy tools and techniques to do that. And then along comes something that's raw horsepower, is just obviates the need for either of those things. And it's always the better solution when you can get it, because you're minimizing that overhead, as you said. All right, well, let's take a quick stop for a quick word from sponsor Meter. Meter delivers full stack networking, wired, wireless, and cellular to leading enterprises. It's a single integrated solution with everything included, and I do mean everything. ISP procurement, security, routers, switches, wireless APs, firewall, cellular, power, DNS security, VPN, SD-WAN, and multi-site workflows. Meter has designed the hardware, written the firmware, and built the software. It is a truly integrated solution. Alongside its partners, Meter designs, deploys, and manages everything required at your site or sites, so you get performant, reliable, and secure connectivity. If you're ready for fast, secure, and scalable connectivity without the complexity of managing multiple providers or tools, it's time to check out Meter. Go to meter.com/networkbreak to book a demo now. That's meter.com/networkbreak, all one word, to book a demo, and we thank Meter for being a sponsor.
So continuing on that theme of optimizing for AI workloads, we've got a story from Qualcomm, which has launched its next generation of AI chips. Qualcomm announced the upcoming availability of its next generation of AI infrastructure for data centers, the Qualcomm AI 200, which is again due early in 2026, and the AI 250, which it's currently slating for 2027. These are processors that are tailored specifically to accelerating inferencing, so running your AI, your LLM specifically in production as opposed to training it. Leveraging the company's network processing unit technology, Qualcomm says these solutions will offer faster AI inference per dollar per watt than competing solutions, i.e. NVIDIA. These are generational updates on their existing AI 100 solution. The AI 200 introduces a purpose-built rack-level AI inference solution aimed specifically at both LLMs and multimodal language models. And the coming AI 250 generation will be introducing a near-memory computing approach that is expected to deliver a 10x improvement in effective memory bandwidth and much lower power consumption, and support disaggregated AI inferencing for even more efficient utilization of your total set of hardware. Thoughts?
So we've got links in the show notes, and my take on this is interesting stuff, but also from my perspective, what I like about this is seeing how far out the poor chip makers always have to plan. So we've got, the 250 for 2027. They are well along in their engineering in order to promote this and talk about what it's going to have. And, just as an engineer, just thinking about trying to design an architect for 2 years out scares me. So hats off to Qualcomm for being able to do that.
And for, keeping their hat in the ring in the steadily spreading pool of vendors that are trying to offer processing level alternatives to NVIDIA and its GPUs. Most of them with an eye on power efficiency much more sharply than NVIDIA's, which is still tending to go gung-ho on performance.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent observation, John. We're sort of moving into the innovate but optimize phase as opposed to just plain innovate, which is always fun. Speaking of which, moving right on to the current competition and the current competitive environment, Cisco is releasing an NVIDIA Silicon switch. Cisco has released its N9100 series of data center switches, which is the basis of an NVIDIA Cloud Partner compliant reference architecture. Cisco is targeting neo-cloud and sovereign cloud customers, that is, folks actually building their own data centers for housing thousands to hundreds of thousands of NVIDIA GPUs. The idea is to provide those folks with diversity in their supply chains, according to Cisco's announcement. So you could have NVIDIA or not, or Cisco. So the Cisco N9100 series delivers a 51.2 terabits per second of capacity and includes not just switches with the NVIDIA Spectrum X Ethernet silicon, but also Cisco's own Silicon One and Cisco Cloud Scale ASICs, and support for both Cisco's NXOS and open source Sonic as operating systems. The goal is that customers can standardize on a single AI networking platform across silicon choices with unified management through the Cisco Nexus dashboard. The chips are available now. That's the N9100, and links are in the show notes. Any thoughts, John?
It's definitely if you can't beat them, join them kind of an option for Cisco, making sure that they stay very relevant in NVIDIA-specific architectures in these data centers that are spinning up, both for service providers and for large enterprises. And I always support Cisco in its eternal ambitions to unify management of its sprawling plant under a single tool. And, my hat's off to them if they've made it work finally. My cynical hat off to anybody who's struggling with it if they still haven't quite got the kinks out of it yet. And thinking about super high capacity Ethernet switches tailored for the AI environment, which we are, Celestica has announced a new 1.6 terabit Ethernet switch. In fact, two new Ethernet switches in the 1.6 terabit range, the DS6000 and the DS6001, both aimed directly at high bandwidth AI and machine learning workloads, which are increasingly dominating data centers. Celestica plans to contribute the specs for both switches to the Open Compute Protocol, OCP, community, and list them on the OCP marketplace as well. The DS6000 is a 3-rack unit, 64-port switch for traditional air-cooled use cases. The DS6001 is a 2OU, and the OUs are for the OCP 21-inch racks as opposed to the standard 19-inch racks, a 2OU 64-port switch with a hybrid cooling option. Both switches use the Broadcom Tomahawk 6 chipset, providing up to 102.4 terabits per second of switching capacity, and they realize a doubling of switch capacity compared to Celestica's existing 800 gig Ethernet solutions. They also offer AI-specific routing features and interconnect options.
Well, this is an interesting one because Celestica really appears to be giving Arista a run for its money in winning deals for hyperscalers and AI infrastructure build-outs in Ethernet switching. As we'll see in upcoming episodes, and later on in this show, hyperscaler has been driving Arista's revenue growth, but Celestica has become a major competitor by providing high-end switches for some of the world's biggest customers. So there's a link in the show notes to more information, and it's just, if you happen to be architecting a hyperscaler or a large data center for your own environment, it's worth noting there's, I don't want to say a new kid on the block, but relatively new in terms of, recent performance. All right, moving along and wrapping up, Celestica has announced its Q3 2025 financial results. We don't yet have Arista's Q3 results, but it's actually possible that Celestica could earn more revenue in 2025 overall than Arista. And let's go parse some of those results. As there's a link in the show notes to the full results, but some highlights for Q3. Their revenue was $3.19 billion for the quarter, increased 28% compared to $2.5 billion for third quarter of 2024. And their margin went up as well, 7.6% compared to 6.8% for Q3 2024. Yeah, right. If you are not a financial person and you're going like, what do all these numbers mean? They're making more money and it's costing them less to make that same dollar. That's a pretty trick to pull off if you can, and they did. Also, it's hard to think of financial folks as having emotions. No offense to anyone who has a financial background, but there's a little line of smugness in their financial results saying based on these results, we are having an increase to the 2025 overall annual outlook, and quote, we now expect revenue to reach 12.2 billion, an increase from the prior 11.55 billion. That is a happy place to be for the financial folks, and you can forgive them for being a little bit a little bit smirky about it because they've earned it. What's most interesting to me, though, is to take a look at where this boost is coming from. And just for reference, Celestica has two operating and reportable segments. The bigger one is something called Connectivity and Cloud Solutions, CCS, which consists of communications and enterprise servers and storage end markets. There is also Advanced Technology Solutions, ATS, which is comprised of aerospace and defense, industrial, health tech, capital equipment businesses. What's interesting is most of the growth, both margin and revenue, is coming from CCS. The CCS segment revenue is 2.41 billion, which is an increase of 43% compared to Q3 2024, and the margin is 8.3% compared to 7.6% for Q3 2024. The hardware platform solution revenue of approximately 1.4 billion increased 79% compared to Q3 2024. Within the ATS segment, on the other hand, the revenue actually decreased a little bit compared to Q3 2024, and the margin did increase. It was 5.5% compared to 4.9% for Q3 2024. Now, if you go back, obviously the question is, why did that happen? If you look at ATS's core customers, it's going into aerospace and defense, industrial, health tech, and capital equipment. As many of you may be aware, aerospace and defense being a government adjacent, at least in the US, group of companies may have been putting the kibosh on making further investments right now because they are potentially, the entire segment is struggling a little bit with what's going on with the government. I could say the same thing is likely happening with health tech, depending on what goes into industrial and capital equipment. It could be happening there as well. So I don't think this is a failure to deliver on Celestica's part. I think it's just, it's there. The economy does seem to have a factor. Any further thoughts, John?
Yeah, just echoing on that last point you were making. There's a solid pullback in some spaces because projects have been canceled or frozen of various sorts, and an echo effect pullback based on uncertainty about what's coming next. And so just an increased level of caution. So I can easily see that hitting that particular segment of their operations at the same time that the AI boom is driving the other piece through the roof.
Yep. And I would just say, once again, with our episode across the board, if somebody wants to ask you where to invest in AI, we do not give investment advice. I certainly will not refuse to give investment advice specifically, but it does seem like the people that are making infrastructure are making out like bandits. So chips, switches, you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. With, of course, the memento mori that there's a bunch of people pointing at it and saying it's a bubble and it's got to burst. So keep that in mind, folks.
Yes. And if you check me out on LinkedIn, which kind of gets us to the wrap up of the show, I am there on LinkedIn, and I actually posted something about 2 months ago, and all I said was, yes, it's a bubble. That was a very interesting and fun discussion. I didn't have to say anything more. Everyone knew what I was talking about. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find us at Nemerdes on nemerdes.substack.com. John, where can folks get more from you personally?
In the two same places, LinkedIn and on Substack, associated with Nemerdes.
And just for those who are trying to find John specifically, as opposed to one of the approximately 8,742 other John Burks, it is search on John E. Burke at Nemerdes. And with that, thank you again, Meter. We really appreciate your sponsorship and hope everyone listening has a fantastic week.